Bob,
Let's see if that's better. Maybe that's better.
remember to mute everyone.
Well, here we are for the question and answer session. It's May 22nd,
Hang on one second. Hey,
2022.
Bob, can you hear me?
And we had 5 questions submitted.
Bob,
I will read them before we start. Hello?
I remember to mute everyone and you're not able to.
I turned it on. Thank you. Okay. So the 5 questions we've got before us today, all good questions. From Tilda, the first question. My question concerns our Canadian Prime Minister. Seems like he's making more enemies than friends amongst us Canadians. Would you be able to look at his chart and give us some insight into his motives and methods? Thank you. Good question. Second question is from Judy Fitek. Do you see transiting and or progressed aspects that suggest the war in Ukraine will expand to involve other countries in Europe? Hopefully not. And then third question is from Leila Bruner. Where is your new book? Reasonable question. God. Fourth question is from Judy Luther. I don't usually ask questions related to economics. However, I wonder if the US dollar will no longer be the standard exchange on the planet by the end of this decade. And then the fifth question or second question from Judy. My second question relates to the stock market. Is this current drop the beginning of further decline this year? Okay, so the first question is, real meat and potatoes, astrology stuff, because this is what I do. Let me see if I can share Justin Trudeau's chart with you. Okay, screen share. So this is Justin Trudeau's chart. Now he's, again, let me say, anybody who's a public figure is fair game. I don't use charts of clients or people that I know casually unless they also happen to be famous, in which case then it's fair game. The other thing is that when an astrologer looks at somebody's chart, we're seeing it through the lens of our own chart, our own life experience. So if we happen to like somebody, we see things more favorably perhaps than if you don't like the person. Case in point, I know a number of astrologers who are conservative and, can you believe it or not, Donald Trump supporters, and they look at his chart differently than I do. But we don't disagree over the birth time and the placements in the chart. And so we can start with that here with Justin Trudeau. Born December 25th, 1971 at 9:24 p.m. This is, near as I know, is a very valid and birth time that's been examined over and over again. Now, there's a number of things that are interesting. And I mean, again, Capricorn with Moon and Aries, that is a very go-getter combination. Capricorns are noted to be slow, but they move, they climb. Moon and Aries people are impulsive, they move quickly. And it is an interesting juxtaposition. We could, again, I could spend all the session talking about his chart, but I just wanted to share a few things that I think are important, germane to the question that was asked. First of all, Tilda and anyone else, for your interest on this, it's tough being an incumbent during this period. And if you look around the world, it's really tough being an incumbent in a democratically elected country. I might say that Justin Trudeau has gone through the Aga Khan affair and the truckers crisis, which I think are the two most telling things of his ability to survive a crisis. For those of you who don't know, the Aga Khan affair is that Aga Khan is a high-ranking Muslim that was a friend of his father's, and he took some vacations with him. And he was censured for this in the Canadian Parliament. And he apologized, and he said it was poor judgment. He didn't admit any wrongdoing. The truckers' crisis, many people thought that he didn't act prudently or swiftly enough. The good news is, and just as an outsider, not as a Canadian, just as an astrologer watching it unfold, he probably did the right thing, which is that he, took a very Capricorn, slow, methodical approach. Many people said that he should have gotten involved and just had all the truckers arrested or whatever. But the point is that's behind him. Now, right now, Trudeau's approval rating is 42%. Well, Joe Biden's approval rating is 41%. Who knew? He's hanging in there. So what are the interesting features in his chart? He's got Venus conjunct the north node of the moon, Dharma, which is for the people, and Venus in Aquarius looking to the future. Venus is trine Saturn on the midheaven. Saturn is a co-ruler of Aquarius, and it's in a grand trine with Pluto. You can see Venus, Pluto, Saturn. The north node of the moon is important here because the north node of the moon is our Dharma for the lifetime. Oh, but the plot thickens, so hang in there with me for a moment. So his ability to get into and out of in unusual situations is pretty massive. Now, Saturn on the midheaven is opposite Neptune on the IC. Now, anytime planets are conjunct, the angles, they have tremendous power and influence to life. Saturn is, the ruler of Capricorn, and it is duty bound. It is traditional. Neptune is the idealism. It is in the futuristic, psychedelic vision of humanity. Now, this is, I think, fascinating because Neptune is trine Mars, and Mars is on the last degree of Pisces, which is a sign that Neptune rules. Neptune trine Mars is tremendous idealism, the ability, if the rest of the chart supports it, to get to some higher purpose in life, some crusade is pushing the individual. Now, Mars and Neptune are in a grand trine with the south node of the moon, suggesting that this crusader spirit comes from past incarnations. Now, look at his chart. Jupiter is the planet of Oriental ascension, rising just before the sun. And people with that placement are often in a hurry. They want to have quick results, which cuts against the grain of the, Capricorn sun. Now, Mercury is loosely conjunct Jupiter. Mercury, Jupiter, lower mind, higher ethical principle in the sign that Jupiter rules, Sagittarius. But there's more, because if you look at the distance, from 9 degrees from Neptune to Mercury, and then from Mercury to Jupiter, 9 degrees, Mercury is on the exact midpoint between Neptune and Jupiter. So it's conjunct both, but that's very futuristic, very idealistic. And people with that placement, with Mercury in that unique spot, they're great talkers. So they can preach a good revolution. But Tilda asks the question about his methods and his values, in his motives. I'm going to say the key to somebody's motive is their third house. It's a long conversation. I want to go into it now, but I'm going to say his motivations are basically pure, meaning that he really is what he says he is, a man of the people and trying to do the best that he can. So is there an Achilles heel in this chart? You betcha. Even though Neptune, Mars, and the South Node form the Grand Trine, and he does have, the Sun square Pluto, which is generally considered a great difficulty. The person who's very compulsive and determined to get their own way. But look at Pluto and Venus are in a Grand Trine with the Saturn on the midheaven, which is, triggered, released into action by Neptune opposing Saturn, meaning that he's strongly committed to doing something that his job determines that is his responsibility in life. Okay, so there's that. But I said there's an Achilles heel in the chart. There's always something, right? The moon is opposite Uranus. Well, that can be somebody who's emotionally impulsive and does things spontaneously and, reacts in a way that gets him into trouble. Okay, and so we can see that. And we can see that acting out in the events. But remember, the moon is also mother. And he had what you would call an extremely colorful mother. And I believe that it is her influence on him that sometimes gets them into trouble. Again, we could explore. I mean, I followed the Trudeaus, from the back in the tail end of the 60s, and interesting family. But I'll leave it with that. I will tell you, I'm not going to, maybe I am. Let me see if I can put up his progress chart, because it's something that's interesting on the timing here. Okay, I don't want to belabor this too much, but let's try this here. If you look at his progressed chart, will you look at this here? The progressed sun is at 24 Aquarius. Progressed moon is at 18 Aquarius. So let's say 6 months from now, he will go through a progressed new moon. That will be starting off on a new trajectory. Now, you can see that the progressed ascendant is coming down on the progressed Uranus, but it's even closer. It's only 2 degrees away from the natal Uranus, and they're in parallel with each other. And what that looks like is, I'm not going to bother putting up the bi wheel, but the point that I'm making is here, if he gets through the next couple of years, he will be on, golden road for about 7 years, meaning over the next couple of years, he's got some rough patches, but I like the guy, if that means anything. I can tell you, some of you have had, been clients of mine, and I don't know that I've ever said this before, but when I look at somebody's chart, I know too much about them. And there's been a number of times, maybe 20 that I can think of, where I looked at somebody's chart and I knew I didn't like the person, and I didn't take them on as a client, even though the reason I had their chart is they had requested an appointment. And I didn't tell them why, but I just said, I can't see you. Anyway, I'm mentioning this to you now because I think that he has a strong likability factor. Again, if you remember, in his progress chart, his Venus is sextile, his natal Venus is right here. And again, in Aries, probably get him out of whatever fix he gets in, but he's got a steep climb over the next couple of years. Anyway, as I say, we could spend the whole session talking about his chart, and I'm trying to limit it because, that's where, when you get into this, we get into, actually working on a person's chart like this, it becomes like falling off a log for me. It's easy. So the second question, as I said, comes from Judy Fitek. Do you see transiting or progressed aspects that suggest the war in Ukraine will expand, involving other countries? I had to laugh when I looked at that and I said, God, there's been so much ink spilled on this, so many commentaries from astrologers on the internet. But I'm going to, and again, I thought, oh my God, what'll I do? But be simple-minded. A birth chart tells the whole story, just like your birth chart tells the whole story. So let's look at the chart for the beginning of the war. So the war begins, and again, maybe people can have different birth time for this, but everybody will agree that it was early in the morning on the 24th that the order went out. So what we have here is a chart with 1 degree Capricorn rising, Sun in Pisces, Saturn at 18 degrees of Aquarius. Now, when you read, the traditional astrology, like the John Frawley, real astrology, where he goes on and on for many books predicting, who's going to win this election and who's going to win, a soccer match, or anytime that there's a contest or a fight. And to the best of my knowledge, I'm certainly not an expert in it, but I've read his books. He always is right. Now, Rob Hand got a PhD in, his history from a Catholic university in Washington, D.C., writing, and his work was on being able to predict military strategies in the Middle Ages. So the initiator of the war is the ascendant. The descendant is the defender. Well, guess what? Mars is in its exalted sign. It's conjunct Pluto, and in it would and with Venus not far away, you would think this is a very strong hand. You know, the aggressor has a strong case to make with all of these planets in the first quadrant. It strengthens the hand of the person who's initiating the war, right? But look at the ruler of the seventh house, you know, in this case, Ukraine, is guess what? It's in the 11th house in Sagittarius. 11th house, friends, Sagittarius, foreign countries. So the question is, are other countries going to be involved? Other countries are already involved. There's a tremendous number of fighters that have come in from other countries. Initially there was like 20,000 repatriated Ukrainians living in the United States and in the Western world and in Europe that went to the Ukrainian embassy, joined up and went in to fight. But there were volunteers, their whole contingent of soldiers from Georgia, the country Georgia, not Atlanta, that went in to support the Ukrainians. And they're very skilled fighters, and they've been fighting against the Russians forever. This is my long-winded way of saying Russia has a very strong hand, but in the end will lose. And I'm going to go further in my prognostication on this. Russia will no longer survive as a country. It will be utterly destroyed by the end of this. I actually hope I'm wrong. It's a terrible thing to see. The determining factor here will be when transiting Saturn conjuncts the sun, and Pluto leaves Capricorn. That will be in January of 2024. But on the 1st of May of 2023, that is when the first conjunction of Saturn to the sun happens. I believe at that point, the sun, Jupiter, and Neptune are all in the second house. When the Saturn conjuncts the sun, ruling the ascendant, economic circumstances in Russia will be so hard that basic staples of life will be out of reach, and the necessary materials for carrying on the war will be out of reach. So again, let me see what else I want to say. Oh, the moon, the progressed moon, if we progress the moon from 7 degrees of Sagittarius forward, it goes into Capricorn in the fall of 2023, and then crosses the Capricorn ascendant. And I believe that that will be the final, unraveling of Russia as a country. Again, this is, there's certainly, there's Nick Campion and Rob Hand and so many other people who are, very fine, mundane astrologers. And this question came in a way out of the blue, and I haven't had a chance to confer with any of the real experts in this field. But what the heck, you're asking for my opinion and I'm giving it to you. Now the third question is from Leela, and her question is, let me see, what did you ask, Leila? Oh, yes. Where the heck is your new book? Okay. Well, you should know I work on it every day, number one. I've been working on it since 2004. I conferred on the topic, this very topic, with 3 well-known professional astrologers late last year, all of who were jumping up and down saying, let it go, let it go, let it go. And a friend of mine said, quoting a famous artist, an artist is never done with a picture. At some point, they just abandon it. And he was saying to me in this light, at some point, you got to abandon this book. The big holdout has been I think I've read everything that's in print and most of what is noteworthy on the internet on the topic of using astrology to raise consciousness for spiritual development and stuff. And I got to say, what I'm doing is so different than anything else that's been done before, because it's truthful, it's authentic, and it's useful. And I feel a great responsibility to make sure that it is right. I don't mind if there's grammatical errors or there's some, like technical inconsistency or something, as long as the basic thrust is correct. 2 editors on the book right now have pointed out some things, and it wasn't that they pointed out where I went with it, but their misunderstanding helped me unravel something that was foundational. And whole chapters had to be rewritten since the first of the year. But that having been said, okay, you asked the question. There'll be copies of this book out fairly soon, but you won't have a printed copy from the publisher until, wait a second. Let me go here. All right. Here is my chart. So the question is about me, basically, and there was no way to do this without putting my chart up. My progressed moon has just crossed into Pisces. It opposes natal Saturn. When this happened a month ago, I renewed my lease for the place that I'm living, which gives me another 15 months living here. But in regards to the book, I want you to see that my Placidus house cusp of the 3rd house is in Capricorn at 449. Progressed Jupiter is just now coming to the conjunction of the 3rd house cusp. So Mercury, which rules thinking, writing, is in Sagittarius, opposes the moon, which is publishing. And I started in, when it was exact, was when I started into serious conversation with publishing companies about what it would take to get this over the top. And again, publishing companies in the astrology world is not like talking to Random House or Scribner's. So the work goes on. My progressed sun is trining Pluto, which rules my ascendant, and it's reinforcing something from, my natal chart, Sun, semi-square, Pluto, Venus. My point is that I have the fire to do this, the insights. I'm not at all pessimistic about the ability to get it done. And when the book will actually be in print, you can do the math, will be when the progressed moon comes to the cusp of my 5th house, which will be a little bit more than a year from now. But that's actually, in publishing terms, that's relatively short. But as I say, anybody who wants to can get and talk to me about it, and I'll make sure within the next few months you get an advanced copy. So anyway, all of these questions are things that we could easily spend a lot of time on, but I wanted to do justice to Judy Luther's last 2 questions. Judy asked, I don't usually ask questions related to economics. However, I was wondering if the US dollar will no longer be the standard exchange on the planet by the end of this decade. Well, Judy, you're sniffing onto something for sure, because since 2014, the US dollar has been semi-officially accepted globally as what's called the reserve currency, meaning that people buy dollars and use that for the medium of exchange. Spain wants to buy rice from France, they do it in dollars. It becomes, in that sense, the international currency. And at the end of near the end of the Second World War, the industrialized nations, and it was actually in 1944, got together in the United States in Bretton Woods and drew up what was called the Bretton Woods Agreement, which basically made it official that the US dollar would be the currency that everybody had to do business in. Okay, but if you get interested in studying the history and you really want to know what went on, in 1973, France wanted to turn their dollars into gold. From 1914 until 1973, the American dollar was backed by gold. But Nixon, love him or hate him, according to polls, he's the most hated president in US history other than Donald Trump. But Nixon did something that was shrewd and necessary. He took the US off the gold standard. By taking it off the gold standard, it meant basically that you could see dollars for what they really were, meaning that they're not worth the paper that they're printed on unless people attribute a value to them. And people say, oh, but when they were backed by gold, then you could turn them in for gold. Yes, but that only has meaning if people give gold a value. All economic exchange is Venus. Venus is the sign of love, harmony, beauty, but it's the planet of interaction. You can have $1 billion in dollar bills, in gold, in whatever currency you want. If you're alone on a desert island, it doesn't do you any good. It only does you good because other people accept it as good. They have faith in you. They have faith in the currency. They know that it's worth differently than monopoly money or Confederate dollars. So what's been going on? There have been, some people have started using yen. Some people have been using euros in recent years as a means of exchange. If you've been following the news very closely, Bulgaria and Poland were cut off from natural gas by Russia because Russia wanted them to pay for it in rubles, which in effect was going to prop up the ruble. And they both refused because the contracts were written to be repaid in dollars. So I'm trying to give you the backdrop that there is this underlying currency war going on right now. That's a backdrop of all the things that we see with the pandemic, with the war, with climate change, so many struggles that we are confronted with. And underlying that, who pays for it? How do we make it happen? Well, contrary to public opinion, the US, doesn't just print dollars and there they are. If they did that, it would be hyperinflation. What we have now, inflation at 7, 8, 9% is bad, but it's nothing like 17, 20%, 200% runaway inflation. And it isn't anything like inflation that we had during the 70s. But my point is that, and Judy put her finger on it, there's something big happening here. There is a movement in Asia right now. It's sort of a silent war going on between Japan and China. Japan is encouraging people to use their currency as a reserve currency. And China has been, assiduously building the foundation for the yuan, the Chinese currency, to become the new reserve currency in the world. So, Judy, what you're pointing to is this. The reason that the US dollar has remained a strong reserve currency, even after decoupling from the dollars, is because the US economy is strong. People trust the US government will, cover their bills, and that the institutional viability of the country is strong enough to support the currency. I think that when Donald Trump was president, that did a lot to shake the foundation of people's beliefs, because anybody who is rational realizes that Donald Trump went at everything in the world like a blind monkey in a dark room with a machine gun. It was like he's all over the map. He was, emotional maturity of a 2-year-old. And his diplomatic finesse on a scale of 1 to 10 was about a -11. So why did people like him when he was acting like a wrecking ball? It's an expression of anger, expression of people disliking other people and wanting to destroy the whole thing to get at one item that was bothering them. So this is a long-winded way of saying the United States will remain the reserve currency, but it will have a different meaning going forward, which is to say, the United States is just going through its Pluto return, which is extremely important in the map of the country. And I didn't want to take time to go into it in detail today. And we've talked about it in other sessions. But the point is that there will be lots of side deals going on between countries in currencies other than dollars. There'll be some exchange that doesn't involve currency at all. Like when Cuba traded the Soviet Union oil for sugar. It wasn't like they were moving dollar bills or rubles or lira around. They were just exchanging goods. It was a barter system, an intricate one, but nonetheless, it was a barter system. There will be more of that going on now in this next period. And you know why? Most simply, for many years, we had globalization going at warp speed. Boom, 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 boom. Companies, closing their factories in the United States and opening a factory in China and Mexico, and businesses being even though people yak and were upset, lots of business going on between United States and Canada. And how many, when the complete idiot governor of Texas was stopping the trucks coming across the border from Mexico, there were billions of dollars of fresh food that rotted, that just went to waste, because we were used to having a system where things, go through very fast. We go from point A to point B. You put them, on a truck or a train, a plane, and 24 hours later, it's just like we had worldwide Amazon Prime. People were used to being able to say, I want one of these, and having it show up at their door the next day. Well, in the international community, the war in Ukraine pounded a nail in that, and there will be immense food shortages in the world over the next 2 years. And fuel disruptions. I mean, this is the illusion. This is the Kali Yuga. We got stuff to go through. This is the realm of Maya. And this is the way our consciousness gets freed from the form. But that's the next act on this. It doesn't mean it's easy. The human mind goes off into fantasy land with this stuff. And it's easy to, envision World War III and atomic bombs going off everywhere. That may happen, but I don't foresee that. But what I do foresee is Russia losing what would be a long, protracted war that drains their economy, isolates them from the world, and they'll come out of it as no longer a power. They're not a superpower anymore, but they won't even be a regular power. They'll be a third world country on the other side of this, if they even hold together as one consistent country at all. So that's the long and short of it. One other thing I wanted to add in on this is the cryptocurrency's taken a big hit recently. And I've advised clients right along with the caveat, I don't understand cryptocurrency. I've taken workshops, day-long workshops on the blockchain and how Bitcoin works and blah, but there's something creepy about it. The idea of having an international medium of exchange that's free from legislative boundaries or tyrants' whims, that's a good concept. And there is something in it that will become what I see as an international currency a little bit later on down the road, but it's not going to happen instantaneously. But if you go back to December 2019, the conjunction of Saturn and Jupiter starting their 20-year cycle, that conjunction was at 0 degrees Aquarius. Well, 0 degrees Aquarius with the ruling planet Uranus in Taurus, the sign of money and stuff, doesn't take a big stretch of the imagination to see, yeah, the medium of exchange will change during the next 20 years. And about 8 years from now, we'll go through a big correction, and then the international currency markets will stabilize, and there will be a medium of exchange. People still probably have Deutschmarks, but Germany is part of the European Union, and the legal tender is the euro. If you catch my drift, there'll still be dollars around, but there will be a new currency that emerges that will be similar to blockchain and all of that type of stuff, but not one where you have to have farms of computers burning up enough electricity every day to light up the city of Chicago. They're on to something, but it hasn't matured yet. Okay, so that's all I have to, again, any of these questions are good, and we could spend the whole hour talking about any one of them. And Judy asked a question. Is the current drop the beginning of further decline this year? This is related to the stock market. The stock market is powered by fear and greed. People put money in or take money out based on fear of losing it somewhere else, or fear that the market's going to go down. People put money into the market based on greed. They want to make more, or they see that they can get a big slice of something. I had a client, oh God, was a day trader after having been a farmer for most of his life, and then he retired. And he said, look at, I was making as a farmer, I was making $3,000 a month. And as a day trader, I lost that much in an hour. I'm not going to do that anymore. And I tell people when they ask me, well, what do you do when you have, extra money? Well, I donate it. I donate money to Mayor Baba Center. I donate money to Orphanage Foundation, the Touch of Love Foundation. I donated money to the relief for Ukraine recently. But the idea of investing in the stock market, just from a purely financial standpoint, I don't think it's a good idea right now. If your money, and I've said this ad nauseum to a number of clients, if you have money in the stock market and you're in your 30s or 40s, and money is going to sit there until you retire at 65 or 70 or some other date like that, don't worry about it. Unless you have stupid stocks, or you're invested in a stupid way. If you have good financial advice and you're in the good positions, that's great. Because yes, it's going to take some gigantic hits in the next 12 months. But not everybody will lose. Some people will go in and out, in and out, in and out, and they'll make a fortune. And you could too, if you're willing to spend all of your time studying the market and watching what goes on and figuring out where things are and taking advice from good astrologers and all of that type of stuff. Yeah, you could make money. But wouldn't you rather do something else with your time than to spend it bent over, the Wall Street Journal and, like in numbers on a ledger on the computer? It's like, it seems to me like, well, if you got to do it, that's your karma. But I would much rather spend my time doing something else. And that's why I've never become what you would call certified as a professional in the financial arena. Now, all that having been said, of the most, it's not 100%, but almost every astrologer that is a financial astrologer that I like and have taken advice from, all of them have made mistakes, big mistakes that were costly for some people. And so in the market's going to go down. I will tell you the market will be at a lower place a year from now than it is right now. But so what? On the other hand, if you're waiting for the housing market to go down and you were planning on buying a house and you have money sitting in the stock market, what would I advise you to do? Well, you can have the money sitting in the bank account in cash. If it's a large enough amount of money that it's beyond the FDIC, insurance, yeah, you may want to diversify it, but staying liquid is probably preferable unless you want to spend a fair amount of time studying exactly where you put your money. And so if you have real need for cash in the next year, probably best to have it in cash. If it's complicated, it's part of a trust, or it's in some kind of complicated legal thing, you have to ask yourself, is it worth the headache? I had a friend, an astrologer friend, David Beasley, who went to a woman's house and did her chart, and she took his ephemeris and didn't pay him and kicked him out of her house. And he took her to court. And the judge ruled in his favor. She had to pay him. She did. She gave him back his ephemeris and whatever else he had there. And I said to David, when it was over, was that worth the anguish in the 6 months of your life that it took to get, as you would call, justice? I always tell my students who are seeing clients, if somebody stiffs you, don't give it a second thought. If they don't pay you, forget it. Don't go there. It's not worth your time. Your time is too valuable. So, my friends, we've come to the end of another hour. I love you all. I am grateful for your questions. And you realize that there's over 1,000 people that get my newsletter, 890 some from me directly. And then there's 2 people who distribute it through their own newsletters. And so it goes out to lots more people. But you're the only ones who take advantage of this unique time together. And I want you to know that I appreciate you. I am glad that, that we have an opportunity to bond and to be together. You take care. I love you. Namaste. Until we meet again. Jai Baba.